Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, talking about the evils of traveling to Cancun during a global warming crisis. 10 years ago, Texas' leading climate academics warned that the state was going to be hot and dry for the rest of the century. They didn't do too well with those predictions. Texas has been getting wetter for a century, and the wettest years on record in Texas have occurred since those forecasts were made in 2011. Texas government listened to the experts and they built lots of windmills at the expense of fossil fuel infrastructure. On February 12th of this year, USA Today was bragging that wind power produced up to two-thirds of Texas energy output in 2020. They said that the success of wind in Texas proved that we could get rid of fossil fuels completely. But 2 days later, it got extremely cold in Texas. The windmills froze up, the power shut down, and millions of people around Texas were without power for a long period of time. Senator Ted Cruz didn't like his family freezing in the house, so he bought plane tickets to Mexico, took the family down there for a few days until the power came back on in Texas. This seems like a very sensible thing to do, but journalists sitting in nice, warm, fossil-fueled powered offices in New York viciously attacked him for doing it. They said that he should have kept his family home freezing during Valentine's Day. But the Ted Cruz family weren't the first people to deal with the global warming crisis by going to Cancun, Mexico. In December of 2010, thousands of global warming activists, academics, and politicians took long-haul flights down to Cancun, Mexico. They were holding a conference to resolve global warming there. For some reason, they almost always seem to hold global warming conferences in very warm tropical places. They keep telling us that the Arctic is really hot, and I don't understand why they don't hold these global warming conferences during December in Winnipeg. In fact, in the year 2004, the UK government's chief scientist, Professor Sir David King, said that we were all going to have to move to Antarctica because every place else would be too hot. So global warming meetings should really be held down at the South Pole. The good news is, though, that on December 11, 2010, the UN climate change talks produced a modest deal that for the first time committed all the major economies to reducing emissions. And then a few months later, this week in 2011, they held another climate change meeting in Bangkok. Negotiators from 173 governments flew in on long-haul flights from all over the world to stop global warming. The papers reported that the talks were taking place as unprecedented heavy flooding in southern Thailand had claimed the lives of more than 50 people. More than a week of heavy rain has unleashed floods in 10 of Thailand's 77 provinces, submerging homes, causing landslides, and washing out roads and bridges. More than 1 million people have been affected, and at least 500,000 have been forced into temporary shelters. The floods were likely caused by climate change, Thailand's deputy chief negotiator said. But if we look at the Wikipedia page about Thailand flooding, we can see that floods occur there almost every year. Wikipedia says floods in Thailand are regular natural disasters which happen nearly every year during the monsoon season. Newspapers.com has more than 40,000 articles about flooding in Thailand. Here's a story from 1978 from Bangkok. Tropical storm Kit swept towards Southeast Asia, already battered from floods that have killed more than 100 persons and damaged millions of acres of crops. Cambodia called this season's floods the worst ever. And then a few weeks later, the Montreal Gazette reported, millions need help after Indochina monsoon deluge. So what was the climate like in 1978? In January of 1978, the New York Times reported, international team of specialists finds no end in sight to 30-year cooling trend in northern hemisphere. So apparently the worst flooding on record in Thailand was due to global cooling, not global warming. They also had terrible floods in 1971, 1966, and many other years. So apparently the deputy chief negotiator for Thailand at the 2011 meeting wasn't telling the truth. And if we look at the history of the dozens of climate meetings which have occurred over the last 30 years, we can see that they haven't accomplished anything. The first meeting was held in Rio 30 years ago, and since then carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have continued to increase exponentially. All these tens of thousands of climate negotiators have been flying all over the world on long-haul flights and on private jets, and they haven't done a thing. All they're doing are taking tropical boondoggles and ripping off the public. Ted Cruz had a very good reason to take his family to Cancun, but the climate conference held there served absolutely no purpose. Let's look at what the real flood story is in Thailand. On May 13th, 1957, it was reported a missionary tells the world that Red Chinese are flooding Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and other nearby countries and provinces with beautiful publications showing a red China which is living up to the rosy promises of communism, all of which is lying propaganda. In Bangkok, studios have been set up to produce movies obviously designed to break down the moral fiber of the people in that area of the world. Narcotics, as easy to get as aspirin is here, is widely distributed to make people happy and well numb to reality. The missionary's testimony before the House Un-American Activities Subcommittee unfolds a demonistic kind of infiltration in Southeast Asia. It's a Marxian theory that things must always get worse before they can evolve communism. Could it be that communists are deliberately trying to produce anarchy before setting out to police such condition and establish the Red Order? If this story sounds familiar, it's because it's exactly what's been going on in the United States for the past few decades. Movies designed to break down the moral fiber of the people, widely distributed narcotics, and anarchy. Global warming isn't the problem. The problem is that our civilization is being intentionally destroyed. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this insanity for the past 13 years. You can visit him and Kyrie on the web at realclimatescience.com.